Well, hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the church. We're actually sitting in our creche because I was in the cafe, but then we have our first time back women's ministry group starting up, and all of a sudden I was like making cafe drinks for everyone. So here we are in the creche. Now, if you're from North America and you're going, what's a creche? We would call it a mums and tots room, a kind of a nursery area for the back of the church. But creche is just more a European way of saying it. So we're going to continue on with our book from Russell Moore, The Storm-Tossed Family. Maybe you have purchased a copy and being able to get it to you if you're in North America, or you probably have used Amazon and you probably got it within about a day. But I have the Kindle version, so we're going to just continue kind of where we left off. And I'll just kind of back it up. We were just talking about headship, and it's a weird kind of term, but let me just read what he says on headship. More of what he says is not. He says, headship will not seem often to the outside world to being, quote, being the head of one's household at all. Headship will look like, in many cases, like weakness, and so does the cross. As a matter of fact, God prepared his people for this aspect of the cross by revealing himself over and over again as someone quite different from Baal. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks rightly notes the way that the Baal meaning, or this master, was connected to, among other things, the idea of husbands, quote, ruling over their wives by the dominion of force. God revealed to Hosea that he would not be called Baal by his people, but instead would be called my husband. The difference is profound, for Hosea, at the core of Baal worship, is the primitive idea that God rules the world by force. And as husbands rule families in societies where power determines the structures of relationships. Sacks argues against this. Hosea paints quite a different possibility of a relationship between marriage partners built on love and mutual loyalty. God is not Baal, he who rules by force, but Ish, he who relates in love. The very word Adam used when he saw Eve. Now, to be sure, this requires genuine leadership. Some Christian men passively watch all that goes on around them in their homes from the comfort of a reclining chair and deem themselves servant leaders, as though, quote, servant in Scripture means disengagement. Jesus gives himself up for his church. Jesus washes his church with water. The church did not initially see the need for either. When Jesus set his face for Jerusalem, Simon Peter, a foundation stone of the church, objected, saying that never would he allow Jesus to be handed over to crucifixion. When the time came for the trek to Skull Place, Peter sought to fight it off with a sword. Jesus responded to these events not with an exercise of dominion, but with teaching of why the cross was necessary. The, quote, washing of water language in the text arises from the prophetic promise that God would, quote, sprinkle water upon his people, cleansing them for life in the new covenant. If you want to check that out, that's Ezekiel 16. a priestly act anticipated in ceremonies of the sacrificial system. When Jesus bathed his church with water in the upper room before his death, once again, the church did not see the need. Simon Peter objected to the washing, but Jesus did not respond passively or passive-aggressively, walking away resentfully, nor did Jesus respond with raw sovereignty, pushing Peter's feet into the water. Once again, he gently taught. John 13. A man does not exercise headship by giving directions and serving himself, but by planning to pour himself out for the best interests of his family. A man is the head of the household, not when he tells his wife what to do, but when he, for instance, crucifies his pornography addiction, seeking help to do so, not simply because he is looking out for his own soul, but also because he loves his wife and wants what's best for her. One of the clearest examples of headship I ever saw was a husband who recognized that his wife was depressed because she wanted children, but could see no way forward to be a mother. She was nearing the biological limits for conception, and she had a massive student debt from medical school. She could pay off the debt only by years of round-the-clock work at her profession, leaving her with little time in her mind to be a mother. Her husband did not come up with orders for her. Rather, he listened to her fears and hopes and worked to bear the burden on himself, to come up with a plan to pay the debt while empowering his wife to be the mother that she believed God was calling her to be. The fact that we see this language of headship in Scripture as being about, quote, who's in charge of whom, instead of what it is, a question of where the primary burden of self-sacrifice falls, tell us much more about our own selfish inclinations than it tells us about the gospel. All leadership in Scripture is different from that of the world. Instead of Roman, quote, benefactors who give orders, Jesus said the heirs of the kingdom serve one another and lay down their lives for one another. We have, after all, been purchased by a cross and are walking forward by the power of the cross. We also sometimes misunderstand why the Scripture speaks in this way, wrongly assuming that the Bible is caught in retrograde patriarchal way of seeing the family. If by patriarchy one means the rule of women by men, then the household codes of the New Testament are decisively anti-patriarchal and much more anti-patriarchal than secular atmosphere around us in the modern age. So, for instance, sociologist Rodney Stark demonstrates that first century Christianity was so empowering of and attractive to women that in 370, Emperor Valentinian issued a decree to the Pope demanding that Christian missionaries stop evangelizing in the homes of women. This was because, Stark argues, women were most likely to convert to the new faith since, among other reasons, within the Christian subculture, women enjoyed far higher status than women did in the Greco-Roman world at large. Our society has made, in many ways, great strides in recent years in recognizing the equality and the dignity of women. Note, for instance, the difference of attitudes, at least in terms of ideals, toward sexual harassment, now as opposed to even just a few decades ago. And yet, look at the ways in which women are brutalized in repressive regimes around the world. and sexualized and objectified even in the most so-called progressive societies. What has gone wrong when a major malady facing young women are eating disorders and the quest to look as thin as models in popular media? Is it really empowering to women when young girls are pressured toward the sort of sexual availability previously demanded by the worst manifestations of masculinity? What is wrong when an era is characterized by sexual assault, trafficking of women and girls, and a popular culture in which the boasting by men of their sexual prowess over women is tolerated and even celebrated? This is a predatory patriarchy worthy of a Bronze Age warlord. In this present darkness, masculinity is often defined as winning, whether in terms of sexual conquest or physical domination of one another or economic advancement. This is hardly new, but goes all the way back to Lamech's prehistoric song boasting of his many women and vengeance he enacted on his enemies. A wounded and insecurely held sense of masculinity often becomes a weaponized masculinity as one seeks to prove one's manhood against all challengers, to win at all costs. And yet, Jesus does not win at all by such a definition. He loses. He does not, though, lose intentionally. No one takes it, my life, from me, but I lay it down, he said in John 10:18. Unlike the fragile masculinity of those who overcompensate with theatrical toughness, Jesus had full confidence in his identity and his future, enough that he could plan to win by losing, by offering himself up for his church. A man who keeps his vows to his wife, who prays with his children, who visits the lonely, who shelters the poor, who serves his church, is more masculine than someone who can outfight everyone in the bar or out-orgasm his fraternity with countless women. Let's just stop there. These stereotypes that Russell Moore's unpacking are, I think, so important for us, for men and women. And I have both those as children. Trying to set up a good, godly, biblical framework for my daughter has been a challenge. I recognize some of the issues of femininity and the ideals and what's been bombarded against her from the very beginning, when she was just a little girl loving pink and purple. You know, this pull and push. I remember when she was really young, there was this big push that, we have to get rid of the pink and purple for the little girls and introduce them to grays and blacks and different, more masculine colors. It's as if it was some kind of repair that they needed. And if your girl played with pink and purple and unicorns, you're just perpetuating a stereotype. Well, we painted Michaela's room pink and purple. She loved all those dolls, and she loved, she's a girl. And not to say that that's what girls like. Boys would play with dolls and like that color as well. But I think we have to be very careful about how we deem as masculine and feminine. I love this last passage that Russell talks about what it means to be a man. Jesus lost, so then it was a win. He gave up his life for the church. I love that story that he talks about where the wife wants to have a child, and if it was just up to her, it would take her years of student debt and paying student debt off. But the husband steps up and says, maybe what we need to do, maybe what he is going to help He's going to come around. He's going to support and give that kind of freedom in financially so that she can focus on being a mom. I just heard of a story just on Sunday of a family waiting for their first grandchild to be born, but their daughter, they had 4 IVF treatments. Talk about just this yearning of wanting to be a mother, and she was in labor. She probably has given birth already. But the amount of energy, time, money, prayer that goes in after those treatments. I know for us, we went through 2 miscarriages before Cyprus, and to see my wife go through the ups and downs, the roller coasters of emotion and hormones. And that's when I didn't sit in my couch and go, grab me a beer, make some dinner. I actually got up and got in and helped and collaborated and worked with so that she can get better and healed. And I had no expectation for her to do her job, be a woman, and provide a son for me. I was like, whatever you want to do, Crystal. You want to hold off for a bit. You want to get healed. And it was almost as we had surrendered the idea of having a second child. It's then we got pregnant with Cyprus. We have to be very cautious, I think, on how we look at our children and look at and define these things as like masculinity and femininity. I think God has given us a definite blueprint in his word for those things. And we need to continue to be like men, to be those prayerful priests that are looking after our whole family, not because we're lording it over them or ruling over anyone, but we are to be the example of Christ, as Christ died for the church, as he suffered and he gave his life. That's what husbands should be writing in their vows at the wedding, as I will give my life to this marriage. I will serve till it hurts. Not because I get some kind of reward, but that's what Christ did to the church. And that is my example. Well, God bless you guys. Good news. We are having our church service here at South City on Sunday. That's right. We're doing one service at 10 o'clock here. It's a bring your own coffee in your own mug kind of situation. So we're not going to have cafe running, but we'd love for you to bring a refreshment. You can come up before church around 9:40 and connect with some people. We'll go into the main sanctuary and have our service. God bless you guys, and we will see you Sunday. Bye for now.